Hello and welcome to our Going Deeper video for the 9th commandment. If you haven't watched our central and main video on this commandment yet, head over and do that now. But if you have, welcome, and I'm happy to have you with us. This one's going to be interesting. I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about. This whole video is going to be focused on redefining some important terms. For those of you who might know me or work with me here, I really like precision. I always think of The Giver when they say precision of language, and I really like precision. So when we're talking about some of these key words with the 9th commandment, I think it's good for us to know what it is that we're really talking about. And some of the words we're going to cover, like chastity, purity, modesty, I think that we've thrown them out a little too soon. For those of you who watched Christopher West's Introduction to the Theology of the Body video, he talked about how there was a picture of what our sexuality was supposed to be, and it got crumpled. And a lot of religious people just saw that it was crumpled and not what it could be, and just threw it away. And maybe like me, a lot of you felt like you were raised in that culture, and so these words became bad. They become symbols of restriction, and your desires are bad, and people trying to control you and tell you that you were wrong. And so I want to take some time for us to try and redeem some of these words and learn them for what they really are. So we're going to start with the word chastity. What do you hear when I say chastity? Maybe you hear restrictive. Maybe you think chastity belt, Maybe you hear no fun. I'm not sure what it is that you hear, what people have said to you. But what I want to share with you today is what is true about the word chastity. Our catechism defines chastity as the successful integration of sexuality within the person, and thus the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. One more time. Chastity is the successful integration of sexuality within the person. So your sexuality well integrated into your entire being, and therefore you have inner unity between your body and soul. That is amazing, right? That's not the chastity I heard when I was growing up. How wonderful it must be, or it would be, or it can be, to feel like your sexuality is completely integrated into who you are. There is nothing about it that is at odds with your faith, with your values, that it is a part of you and you feel united inside. The Catechism says that when we're living this idea of chastity, it cannot tolerate neither a double life nor duplicity in speech. And I think the area of sexuality is one where people often feel like they're leading a double life. Like they believe in God, they pray, but they don't know how to integrate their sexuality into that. And the virtue of chastity teaches us how at every stage of your life, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you were married at one point, chastity will guide you toward being a whole, united person, where you can feel confident in all the different pieces of you, and that there's no double living. The word integrity comes up a lot as we research chastity. So I want to redeem the word chastity and what it truly is. Similarly, I want to talk a little bit about the word purity. What do you hear when I say the word purity? Some of you, like me, may have been influenced by what we call now the purity culture. And the purity culture wasn't all bad, but it was a movement that in the church that tried to promote purity and went a little too far. Some of us were raised with examples like take a tube of toothpaste and you squeeze out all the toothpaste, and then your parent says, try to put it back in. That's what happens, if you mess up sexually. Or take a flower and crumple that flower. Now try to make it look beautiful again. That's what happens if you mess up sexually. And that's how they tried to teach young people and people in general about purity for a while. And that is painful and reductionistic and not hopeful. And we are a faith that is hopeful. So maybe you hear purity and you think shame. You think, something I once had that I can never get back to. But what is true about purity, what our catechism says, is that pure of heart refers to those who have attuned their intellects and wills to the demands of God's holiness. So it's people who have attuned their intellects and wills to God's holiness. So purity is all about being aligned with God, knowing what God is calling us to, and wanting to follow God. They even sort of outline three main areas that we see this in. The first is charity or love. How are you loving? Is your will aligned with God's will for love in your life? Another one is chastity. We just spoke about that. How successfully integrated is your sexuality into the rest of your being? And finally, love of truth. So purity is about aligning ourselves with God when it comes to love, chastity, and truth. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful image, one that I would love to live out, to be a pure person who is aligned with God's will for love, for charity, and for truth. The next word we talked about a little bit in our main video on the ninth commandment, which was modesty, right? What we hear is ugly clothing, right? Skirts all the way down and everything covered. That's what comes to mind often, or perhaps that terrible phrase, modest is hottest. But what is true about modesty, as we said, is it's all about protecting what is intimate, both in our feelings and our body. And of course, we should protect what is intimate. That's how we will prevent hurt, right? We can't share what is intimate with people who don't deserve it. We keep that safe. And so let's reclaim the word modesty. And finally, to wrap up, the last word I want to redefine is a little bit different. But I want to redefine the word lust. What do we hear when we hear lust? And I think somehow our society today has actually made lust a good thing, right? And we might think, well, you want to lust for your husband or your wife or your significant other, that's actually a good thing, right? But when we turn to the Catechism, we see lust defined as disordered desire for or inordinate enjoyment of sexual pleasure. So disordered desire for sexual pleasure or inordinate enjoyment of sexual pleasure. And so I think we hear that and then we jump to, well, the church is against sexual desire. But we've been, this is what we've been talking about for the past few weeks, that's not what the church is teaching. The church is for your desires. The church is against disordered desires, right? And so it's not that you want to lust for your spouse, That's not what we're going for. Lust is disordered desire. You want to desire them the way that God intended, properly. Not that your desires are bad, but that they are good when they are ordered in the way that God has designed them, and that He is a part of them, right? That He doesn't want to suppress, but He wants to help you find and fulfill your desires. And so I hope that you'll join me. These are just 4 words. I know there's so many others that we've lost, and maybe we need to reclaim as a church. So join me. Think about words that maybe turn you off or sound too churchy or you have bad associations with, and help us reclaim these beautiful truths about the life that we're called to live. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time on Going Deeper.